He tried to throw out a quiet kid from table 9, then the waitress stepped in. Seconds later, the restaurant froze when the kid's father walked in. Every fork stopped mid-air. Because the Mafia boss had just seen who defended his son, and what happened next changed her life forever. If you're hooked in and want to enjoy this story, go ahead and subscribe, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see where everyone's watching. Plus, tomorrow I've got another incredible story lined up, and you definitely don't want to miss it. Alright, back to the story. The late lunch crowd at Bellagio Prime moved like a symphony of whispered deals and clinking crystal. Karen Grease balanced 3 appetizer plates along her left forearm and a basket of focaccia in her right hand, navigating between tables with the muscle memory of someone who'd long since stopped thinking about the mechanics of survival. The dining room glowed with afternoon light filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating men in tailored suits and women dripping in subtle wealth. Conversations hummed at that particular frequency where power didn't need to raise its voice. She'd been doing this for 2 years now, ever since her accounting degree had proven to be nothing more than expensive paper in a market that wanted 5 years of experience for entry-level positions. The irony stung every time she calculated someone's change. She could untangle corporate tax schemes and spot embezzlement from 3 ledgers away, but she couldn't afford to live without tips from people who'd forget her name before dessert arrived. That's when she saw him. The boy couldn't have been more than 9 or 10, sitting perfectly still in the corner booth near the rain-streaked windows. His dark hair was neatly combed, his navy sweater expensive but understated, and his hands were folded on the white tablecloth like he'd been taught never to fidget. But his eyes, large and brown and far too old for his face, stared out at the storm with the kind of stillness that came from holding back tears. "Hey there," Karen said softly, approaching with the gentleness she'd use with a wounded bird. "You waiting for someone?" The boy's gaze shifted to her. He nodded once but didn't speak. "That's okay. Would you like some water while you wait? Maybe some bread?" Another nod. Still no words. Karen was reaching for her water pitcher when she heard the sharp rap of leather soles on marble. "Mister?" Harlan bawled, perpetually frowning. With a suit that cost more than her monthly rent was cutting across the dining room, with the expression of someone who'd found a problem to solve with maximum efficiency. "Excuse me," Harlan said, his voice carrying across 2 tables. "That booth is reserved for paying customers." The boy's shoulders drew inward, and Karen felt something protective and fierce ignite in her chest. "He's clearly waiting for his parent," Karen said, keeping her voice steady. "He's not causing any trouble." Harlan's jaw tightened. He'd been manager for 6 months, brought in from corporate to optimize operations, which apparently meant reminding the staff daily that they were replaceable. "I don't recall asking for your opinion, Grease." He turned back to the boy. "You need to leave. Now." The boy's eyes widened, and Karen saw his bottom lip begin to tremble. "He's a child," Karen said, stepping between them. "Not a threat to your bottom line. He's sitting quietly and waiting. There's no reason to." "There's every reason," Harlan hissed, leaning closer. "Do you know what that table generates per hour? Do you know the kind of clientele we maintain? We can't have random children taking up real estate." "He's not random. Look at his clothes." It was true. The boy's outfit probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, and his posture alone spoke of private schools and etiquette lessons. "I don't care if he's dressed like royalty," Harlan snapped. "He's unaccompanied, and that's a liability. Now step aside. Or what?" The voice came from behind them, low, controlled, and cold enough to stop every conversation within 20 feet. Karen didn't turn around immediately. Her heart was hammering too hard, her hands still trembling from adrenaline. But she felt the shift in the room, the way conversations died mid-sentence, the way even Harlan went rigid. And when she finally did turn, she saw him. Tall, dark suit that probably cost more than her car. Tattoos curling up his neck like smoke, disappearing beneath his collar. A face that might have been handsome if it weren't so utterly devoid of warmth. And eyes gray as winter ice that held the kind of certainty that came from never being questioned. "Papa," the boy whispered, and his voice cracked with relief. The man's expression didn't change, but something in his posture softened almost imperceptibly. "Mateo." The boy slid out of the booth and didn't run to his father's side. The man's hand came to rest on his son's shoulder, protective and possessive at once. Harlan had gone pale. "Mr. Angelo, I didn't realize." "Clearly." The man's voice was quiet, but it cut through the dining room like a blade. His eyes moved from Harlan to Karen, assessing her with the kind of focus that made her feel simultaneously seen and dissected. "This woman," he said, still looking at Karen. Defended my son when you tried to throw him out. It wasn't a question. Harlan stammered something about policy and procedures, but Angelo raised one hand and the manager fell silent like someone had cut his strings. You're fired, Angelo said to Harlan. Then his gaze shifted back to Karen. You. What's your name? Karen, she managed. Karen Grease. He studied her for another long moment, then nodded once, a gesture that seemed to contain more weight than it should. We'll talk again, he said. Then he turned, his hand still on his son's shoulder, and walked out. The restaurant remained frozen for 3 full seconds after the door closed behind them. Karen stood there, water pitcher still in her hand, and realized her entire life had just changed. She just didn't know how much. Karen's hands wouldn't stop shaking. She stood in the storage room behind the kitchen, shoving her apron into her locker with more force than necessary. The metal door clanged shut, echoing in the small space like a funeral bell. You need to leave, Harlan had said, his voice tight with humiliation and rage. 20 minutes after Leo Angelo walked out, 20 minutes after the dining room had slowly, cautiously, returned to its manufactured elegance. Now, Grease, security will escort you out. She hadn't argued. What was the point? She'd known the moment she stepped between Harlan and that boy that she was drawing a line she couldn't uncross. She just hadn't expected it to hurt this much. Her final paycheck sat in an envelope in her purse, 2 weeks' pay plus accumulated tips. It should have felt heavier, given that it was all that stood between her and eviction. Instead, it felt like ashes. The other servers had watched her pack up with the careful neutrality of people who couldn't afford to show sympathy. Maria, who'd trained her 2 years ago, had mouthed, "I'm sorry," from across the kitchen. David had squeezed her shoulder once as he passed, but nobody spoke up. Nobody protested. They couldn't. They had their own bills, their own precarious holds on employment. Karen understood. She'd have done the same thing a few hours ago. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside, cold and unrelenting. She hadn't brought an umbrella. Hadn't thought she'd need one when she'd walked in for her shift that morning, back when her biggest worry was whether Table 6 would stiff her on the tip again. The bus stop was 3 blocks away. She walked with her head down, her jacket pulled tight, her hair plastering to her face. The city moved around her, cars splashing through puddles, people hurrying beneath umbrellas, the world continuing like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. She'd lost her job defending a child she didn't know. A child whose father was apparently someone important enough to make a man like Harlan go pale. Someone whose name Angelo she'd heard whispered in the break room once or twice, always followed by a change of subject. Karen pulled out her phone as she waited at the bus stop, rain drumming on the plastic shelter above her. She opened her banking app, already knowing what she'd find. $847. Rent was due in 8 days. $1,200. Her chest tightened. The bus came. She climbed on, found a seat near the back, and stared out the window at the blurred city lights. Her reflection stared back, tired eyes, cheap jacket, the face of someone who'd just made a very expensive moral choice. Was it worth it? She thought about the boy's face when Harlan had loomed over him. The way his shoulders had hunched inward, trying to disappear. The tremble in his bottom lip that he'd fought so hard to control. Yes, she thought. It was worth it, even if it destroyed her. Across the city, in a penthouse office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-soaked skyline, Leo Angelo stood with a glass of whiskey in his hand and watched the storm. Matteo sat on the leather couch behind him, finally calm after the silent car ride home, finally breathing normally. "Papa?" Matteo's voice was small. Leo turned. "Yes? Will the lady be okay?" Leo studied his son's face, the same dark eyes as his mother, the same quiet intensity. At 9 years old, Matteo had already learned to hide his fear, to compose his face into stillness even when his world was falling apart. It was a survival skill in their world. But today, he'd been caught off guard. Alone at the restaurant while Leo finished a meeting that had run long. Alone when that manager had decided he was a problem to be removed. And a waitress, a nobody, someone with everything to lose, had stood between his son and humiliation. "She lost her job because of me," Matteo said quietly. "She lost her job because she did what was right," Leo corrected. "There's a difference." "But, Matteo." Leo set down his glass and crossed to the couch, sitting beside his son. "That woman didn't know who you were. She didn't know who I was. She defended you because she saw a child who needed defending. Do you understand how rare that is?" Matteo nodded slowly. "Most people, Leo continued. Make choices based on what benefits them. What's safe, what's profitable. She made a choice that cost her everything, and she made it anyway. Are you going to help her? Leo was quiet for a moment. He thought about the way Karen Grease had stood her ground, voice steady even as her hands trembled. The way she'd looked at Mateo with genuine concern, not calculation, the fierce protectiveness in her eyes when she'd stepped between his son and that manager. Loyalty without motive was the rarest commodity in his world. Rarer than gold, rarer than leverage. And she'd shown it without even knowing she was being tested. Yes, Leo said finally. I'm going to help her. That night, Karen sat in her studio apartment with a mug of instant ramen and her laptop open to job search sites. The rain continued outside, a steady percussion against her single window. She'd applied to 4 positions already. 2 restaurants, 1 accounting firm that probably wouldn't call her back, and a grocery store that was hiring cashiers. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something instinct, curiosity, desperation made her swipe to accept. Hello? Miss Grease. The voice was familiar, deep, controlled. This is Leo Angelo. We need to talk. Karen's hand tightened on the phone. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. I'll send a car to your address. How do you... She started, but he continued as if she hadn't spoken. You stood up for my son today. That means something to me. We'll discuss what happens next. The line went dead. Karen sat frozen, staring at her phone, wondering if she'd just been offered salvation or signed a contract with the devil. Outside, a black sedan pulled up across the street from her building, its headlights dimmed. The driver settled in to wait. Karen didn't sleep. She spent the night alternating between staring at her phone and Googling Leo Angelo on her laptop. The search results were frustratingly vague mentions in business journals about Angelo Holdings, a legitimate-looking portfolio of restaurants and logistics companies, a few society page photos from charity galas, always in the background, never the focus. And then there were the Reddit threads, the whispered speculation, the deleted comments that said, "Don't ask questions you don't want answered." By 5 a.m., she'd convinced herself she was being paranoid. By 6 a.m., she'd convinced herself she wasn't being paranoid enough. By 7 a.m., she'd changed outfits 3 times and settled on simple black pants and a cream blouse, professional but not trying too hard. The knock came at exactly 8:47 a.m., 3 sharp raps that seemed to vibrate through her entire studio apartment. Karen's heart hammered as she checked the peephole. A man stood in the hallway, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark coat that screamed expensive. Behind him, through the window at the end of the corridor, she could see a black sedan idling at the curb. She opened the door a crack, the chain lock still engaged. "Miss Grease?" The man's voice was polite but firm. "Mr. Angelo sent me. He's waiting. I need a minute." "Of course." The man stepped back, giving her space. "I'll be in the car." Karen closed the door and leaned against it, her breath coming in shallow bursts. This was insane. She should call someone, tell someone where she was going. Except she didn't know where she was going, and who would she call anyway? Her mother, 3 states away? Her college roommate who she hadn't spoken to in 6 months? She grabbed her purse, checked that her phone was charged, and sent a quick text to Maria from the restaurant. "If you don't hear from me by noon, I met with someone named Leo Angelo this morning." Maria's response came immediately. "Who? Are you okay?" Karen didn't answer. She just pocketed her phone and walked out. The sedan was warm and smelled like leather and expensive cologne. The driver said nothing as they pulled away from her building, navigating through morning traffic with the confidence of someone who knew every shortcut in the city. Karen watched the streets change from her worn-down neighborhood to the financial district, then to an area she'd only seen in magazines, converted warehouses that now housed 7-figure lofts, boutique coffee shops where a latte cost $12, tree-lined streets that looked like they'd been imported from Europe. The car stopped in front of a building that was all glass and steel and understated wealth. The kind of place that didn't need a sign because, if you had to ask, you didn't belong there. 10th floor, the driver said, the first words he'd spoken since they left. "Mr. Angelo is expecting you." The elevator was mirrored and silent. Karen watched her reflection as she ascended, a woman trying desperately to look calm while her hands twisted the strap of her purse into knots. The doors opened directly into a penthouse office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the entire city. Morning light poured in, making everything glow. The furniture was minimal but clearly expensive. A massive desk in dark wood, leather chairs, abstract art on the walls that probably cost more than her annual salary. And there, standing by the window with his back to her, was Leo Angelo. Miss Grease. He turned, and she was struck again by how still he was. How controlled. Like every movement was calculated. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" The words escaped before she could stop them. A ghost of something amusement? Respect? Flickered across his face. "There's always a choice. You could have refused. Changed your number. Left town. Should I have? That depends on what you value more, safety or opportunity." Before Karen could respond, a door to the side opened and Matteo appeared, still in pajamas. His face lit up when he saw her. "You came!" He ran across the office and wrapped his arms around her waist before Leo could stop him. Karen froze, then slowly, carefully, hugged him back. She felt him trembling slightly, and something in her chest cracked open. "Hey," she said softly. "Of course I came. Matteo." Leo's voice was gentle but firm. "Let Miss Grease breathe." The boy stepped back, but his smile remained. It was the first time Karen had seen him smile, and it transformed his entire face. "I told Papa what you did," Matteo said. "How you protected me. He said you were brave." Karen looked up at Leo, who was watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Matteo, go get dressed," Leo said. "We'll have breakfast in a few minutes." The boy nodded and disappeared through the side door, leaving Karen alone with his father. "He doesn't smile much," Leo said quietly. "Not since his mother died." Karen's throat tightened. "I'm sorry. 2 years ago. Cancer." Leo gestured to one of the leather chairs. "Please, sit." Karen sat, her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Leo took the chair across from her, leaning back in a way that somehow made him seem more dangerous, not less. "You lost your job yesterday," he said. "Because you defended my son." "Yes. And you're wondering why I brought you here." The thought crossed my mind. Leo reached across the desk and slid a folder toward her. "Angelo Holdings has several subsidiaries. One of them needs a personal assistant, someone who understands finance, can manage complex schedules, and has demonstrated the ability to make difficult decisions under pressure." Karen stared at the folder without touching it. "You're offering me a job." "I'm offering you an opportunity. The salary is triple what you were making at Bellagio Prime. Full benefits, signing bonus to cover your immediate expenses." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch?" Karen asked. Leo's eyes met hers, cold and assessing. "The catch, Miss Grease, is that you'll be working for me. And in my world, loyalty isn't just valued, it's required. Can you handle that?" Karen thought about her bank account, her overdue rent, the choice between pride and survival. Then she thought about Matteo's smile. "Yes," she said. "I can handle that." Leo nodded once and slid a pen across the desk. "Then welcome to Angelo Holdings." Karen's first day at Angelo Holdings began with a keycard, a corner office she didn't deserve, and the growing suspicion that she'd just signed a contract she didn't fully understand. The building was in the heart of the financial district, 30 floors of glass and steel housing what appeared to be legitimate businesses. Angelo Holdings occupied floors 23 through 28. Restaurants, import, export logistics, real estate development, entertainment venue. On paper, everything looked clean, professional, legal, but paper lied. Karen learned that within the first hour. Her official title was Executive Assistant to Operations, which apparently meant managing Leo's calendar, coordinating between department heads, and having access to files that made her accounting degree suddenly feel very relevant and very dangerous. "You'll report directly to Mr. Angelo," said Christine, the severe woman in her 50s who'd handed Karen her keycard. "He values discretion above all else. What you see here stays here. Understood?" "Understood," Karen had replied, though she wasn't sure she understood anything anymore. Her office was smaller than Leo's but still larger than her entire apartment. Windows overlooked the city. A computer sat on a minimalist desk, already logged into systems with her new credentials. A phone with more buttons than she knew what to do with. And files. So many files. She spent the morning reviewing spreadsheets that should have been straightforward: restaurant revenues, supply chain logistics, property acquisitions. But the numbers didn't quite add up. There were gaps. Payments to vendors that didn't exist. Transactions that moved through 3 shell companies before landing somewhere untraceable. Karen's hands hovered over her keyboard. Every instinct from her accounting training screamed that something was wrong. But she'd been hired precisely because she'd shown loyalty without asking questions. So she kept her mouth shut and kept reading. Lunch came in the form of Mateo appearing at her door with a brown bag and that same shy smile. "Papa said you probably forgot to eat," he said, setting the bag on her desk. "So I brought you something from the cafe downstairs." Karen's heart squeezed. "That's really sweet of you. Thank you." Mateo lingered in the doorway, fidgeting with the hem of his school uniform. "Do you like it here?" "I've only been here a few hours," Karen said gently. "But so far, everyone's been very professional. They're scared of Papa," Mateo said matter-of-factly. "Most people are." "Are you?" The boy considered this seriously. "Sometimes, when he's angry, but mostly I just wish he smiled more." He paused, "Like he did when you were at the apartment this morning." Karen hadn't noticed Leo smiling. But then again, she'd been too nervous to notice much of anything. "Your papa loves you very much," she said. "Sometimes that's hard for grown-ups to show." "Mama used to make him laugh," Mateo said quietly. "Before she got sick, after. Everything got quieter, colder." He looked up at Karen with those two old eyes. "Do you think people can learn to be warm again?" The question hit her harder than it should have. "I think so. With the right person. With time." Mateo nodded, seeming satisfied. "I'm glad you're here, Miss Grease." "Karen," she corrected. "You can call me Karen." His smile widened. "Okay, Karen." After he left, Karen sat staring at the sandwich she couldn't quite bring herself to eat, wondering what exactly she'd gotten herself into. The answer came at 6 p.m., when most of the staff had gone home. Karen was still at her desk, cross-referencing payment records, when she heard voices from down the hall. Low, tense. She shouldn't have been eavesdropping, but her office door was cracked open and sound traveled in the empty corridor. "Can't keep doing this, Leo. The risk is too high." "The risk is managed," Leo's voice, calm and absolute. "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, bringing in an outsider right now seems like the opposite of risk management." "She's not an outsider. Not anymore. She's a waitress who stumbled into your son. That doesn't make her family." "No. But her character does." A pause. "Then, I hope you're right. Because if Marco finds out, Marco doesn't need to know. Not yet." The voices moved away, and Karen's heart hammered in her chest. She forced herself to breathe slowly, to focus on the screen in front of her, to pretend she hadn't heard anything. But she had. And now questions she'd been avoiding crashed over her like a wave. Who was Marco? What did Leo need to manage? And why did hiring her feel like it had strategic implications beyond just replacing a fired waitress? Karen closed the files on her screen and reached for her purse. It was late. She should go home, process everything. Maybe even reconsider whether triple her old salary was worth whatever this was becoming. Her office door opened without warning. Leo stood in the doorway, still in his suit, his tie loosened slightly. He looked tired in a way that made him seem almost human. "You're still here," he observed. "I was just trying to familiarize myself with the systems." His eyes moved to her computer screen, now dark. "Find anything interesting?" Karen's pulse spiked. "Just the usual accounting discrepancies. Every company has them." "Do they?" Leo stepped into her office, and suddenly the space felt much smaller. "What kind of discrepancies?" This was a test. She could feel it. "The kind," Karen said carefully, "that suggest either very creative bookkeeping or very complicated business relationships. I assume it's the former. And if it were the latter?" Karen met his gaze directly. "Then I'd assume you hired me because you needed someone who could read between the lines, not someone who'd report what they found there." Something shifted in Leo's expression, approval maybe, or recognition. "You're smarter than I expected," he said quietly. "Is that a compliment or a problem?" "That depends entirely on what you do with that intelligence." He moved toward the window, looking out at the city lights beginning to glow in the dusk. "My world is complicated, Karen. Dangerous even. But it's also the only world I have. The only world Mateo has." "Why are you telling me this?" Leo turned back to her. "Because you're already in it, whether you realized it when you signed that contract or not. And I need to know, are you going to run the first time things get difficult? Or are you going to stay?" Karen thought about Mateo's smile, about the way he'd said, "I'm glad you're here," about how this terrifying, powerful man had softened just slightly when his son had hugged her. I'll stay, she said. Leo nodded once. Good. Because tomorrow, things get complicated. Karen started noticing the patterns on her third day. Files she'd opened the previous evening would be moved by morning, not dramatically, just subtle reorganizations that only someone with an eye for detail would catch. Documents she'd bookmarked disappeared from the server, then reappeared hours later with slightly different timestamps. Someone was watching her digital footprint. She didn't mention it to Leo. Not yet. Instead, she started taking notes by hand, keeping a small leather journal in her purse. She began arriving earlier, staying later, mapping out the financial discrepancies she was finding with the methodical precision of someone trained to spot fraud. The payments to ghost vendors, the offshore accounts buried 3 layers deep, the shipments that existed on paper but never appeared in physical inventory logs. And then there was Marco Vescari. She'd first seen him on her second day, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He'd walked past her office with 2 other men, barely glancing her way. But she'd felt the weight of his assessment, the way predators sized up prey. That's Marco, Christine had said when Karen asked. Mr. Angelo's second in command. Been with the organization for 15 years. Organization, not company. The word choice felt deliberate. Karen had watched Marco through her office window as he disappeared into a conference room. Something about him made her skin crawl. Now, 5 days into her employment, she was beginning to understand why. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. Most of the staff had left by 7. Karen sat at her desk, cross-referencing a series of wire transfers that had caught her attention. Money moving from Angelo Holdings to a logistics company called Meridian Transport, from there to a shell corporation in the Caymans, then back through a property management firm that owned several of Leo's restaurants. Classic money laundering. She'd studied the patterns in school, but seeing them live was different, more elegant, more dangerous. She pulled up the authorization signatures. Marco Vescari. Every single transfer. Karen's hand stilled on her keyboard. Her accounting professor's voice echoed in her memory. When you find fraud, ask yourself who benefits, and who has the power to hide it. She opened another file. Purchase orders for restaurant supplies that exceeded typical volume by 40%. All approved by Marco. All delivered to locations that didn't match the restaurant addresses. Her pulse quickened. She was about to dig deeper when her office phone rang, making her jump. Yes? Karen. Leo's voice was tight. My office. Now. She found him standing by his window, the city lights painting shadows across his face. Matteo sat on the leather couch, unusually quiet, a textbook open but untouched in his lap. We have a situation, Leo said without preamble. Matteo's school called. Someone tried to pick him up this afternoon, claimed to be his uncle. Karen's stomach dropped. But he doesn't have... No, he doesn't. Leo's jaw was tight. Security stopped them, but whoever it was disappeared before police arrived. Papa thinks it was a message, Matteo said quietly. He looked small on the large couch, trying to be brave. Karen crossed to him instinctively, sitting beside him. Are you okay? He nodded, but his hands were trembling slightly. This isn't random, Leo said, his voice cold with controlled fury. Someone is testing our defenses, seeing how close they can get to my son. Who would? Karen started, but Leo's expression stopped her. That's what I'm going to find out. He looked at Matteo. Until I do, you don't go anywhere without security. School, home. That's it. Yes, Papa. Leo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, his face hardening further. I need to handle this. Karen, stay with him until I get back. Of course. After Leo left, Karen and Matteo sat in heavy silence. She could feel the boy's fear radiating off him in waves, despite his composed exterior. Does this happen a lot? She asked gently. Sometimes. Papa has enemies, people who want what he has. Matteo looked up at her. He never talks about it, but I hear things, see things. That must be scary. It's just how things are. He paused. But today was different. The man who tried to take me, he knew my name, knew about Mama, knew things only family would know. Karen's blood ran cold. Did you tell your father that? He didn't ask. He just told me to be careful. She pulled out her phone, texting Leo. We need to talk. It's important. His response came quickly. In meeting. Can it wait? Karen looked at Matteo's frightened face and typed, No. 20 minutes later, Leo returned with Marco in tow. Karen's entire body tensed when she saw them together. You said it was urgent, Leo said. Karen glanced at Marco, then back to Leo. Maybe we should. Marco is my most trusted advisor. Leo cut her off. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of him. Karen's mind raced. The files, the money trails, the attempt on Mateo. It couldn't be coincidence. But Marco was watching her with those cold, assessing eyes. And Leo trusted him. Mateo said something, Karen began carefully. About the man who tried to take him. He knew personal details, family information. Marco's expression didn't change. That's concerning. We should increase security protocols. I agree, Leo said. It means it's someone inside, Karen interrupted. Someone with access to private family information. The room went silent. Marco's smile was thin. Are you accusing someone, Miss Grease? I'm stating a fact. Only people in your inner circle would have that kind of access. She has a point, Leo said quietly, but Karen saw the tension in his shoulders. The doubt. Marco turned to Leo. With respect, she's been here less than a week. Maybe jumping to conclusions about internal threats isn't... Maybe, Karen said, her voice steady despite her hammering heart. Someone should look at who's been authorizing unusual transactions, wire transfers to companies that don't exist, supply orders that exceed demand by 40%. Marco's smile vanished. Leo's eyes narrowed. Karen, what are you talking about? She'd just painted a target on her back. She could feel it. But Mateo was sitting right there, small and scared and vulnerable. I'm talking about someone using your company to move money, Karen said. Someone who has signing authority. Someone you trust. Her eyes locked with Marco's. And I think, she continued, that same someone wants Mateo as leverage. The air in the room turned to ice. The silence that followed Karen's accusation felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Marco's expression shifted, the polite mask slipping for just a fraction of a second to reveal something darker underneath. Then it was back, smooth as glass. That's quite an accusation, he said softly. From someone who's been here barely a week. Long enough to spot irregularities, Karen replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Long enough to see patterns. Leo's face was unreadable. He looked from Karen to Marco, then back again. What patterns? Wire transfers to Meridian Transport. Company doesn't exist, not really. Just a shell that funnels money offshore. All authorized by Marco. Karen's hands clenched at her sides. Supply orders 40% above normal volume, delivered to locations that don't match any of our properties. Purchase orders signed by... Enough! Leo's voice cut through the room like a blade. Karen's heart stopped. Leo turned to Marco. Is this true? Leo, you know me. Marco's tone was perfectly calibrated, hurt, confused, loyal. 15 years. I've been with you through everything. And you're going to believe some waitress you hired out of guilt over... I asked if it's true. Marco's jaw tightened. Some transactions require discretion. You know that. Not everything can be documented in ways that... Show me the files, Leo said to Karen. I don't have access from here, she said. They're on my office computer. Then let's go to your office. Marco stood. Leo, this is ridiculous. She's clearly trying to... Stay with Mateo, Leo ordered, his tone brooking no argument. To one of the security guards by the door. No one leaves this room until I return. Karen's hands trembled as she pulled up the files on her computer. Leo stood behind her, close enough that she could feel the tension radiating off him. Here, she said, opening the first spreadsheet. Meridian Transport. 5 transfers in the last 3 months. Total of 2.3 million. Leo leaned closer, his eyes scanning the numbers. Corporate structure? Shell company registered in Delaware. No actual operations. Money flows through to an account in the Caymans, then back through a property management firm that owns 3 of your restaurants. Which restaurants? Bella Vista, Sapphire, and the Sterling Room. Leo's expression darkened. Those 3 have been underperforming for 6 months. Marco said it was market conditions. It's not market conditions. Someone's skimming profits and disguising it as operational losses. Karen pulled up another file. And here, supply orders. You're paying for inventory that never arrives. Or it arrives but gets diverted. To where? I don't know yet. But Marco signs off on every single discrepancy. I don't know yet. Leo was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. This could be explained. Legitimate business reasons for Matteo, Karen said quietly. Today, someone tried to take him. Someone who knew personal details about your family. Marco wouldn't. Wouldn't he? If he's stealing from you, if he's building something on the side, what's the best leverage he could have? Karen turned to face Leo. Your son. The one thing you'd trade everything for. Leo's eyes were cold and dangerous. You're saying Marco is behind the attempt. I'm saying the timing is convenient. I start looking at the books, finding irregularities tied to him, and suddenly there's a threat to Matteo? That's not coincidence. Or, Leo said slowly, you're wrong, and you just accused my most trusted advisor, a man who's been loyal for 15 years of betrayal and attempted kidnapping, based on accounting irregularities that might have perfectly reasonable explanations. Karen's stomach dropped. You don't believe me. I don't know what to believe. Leo stepped back, his face a mask. You've been here less than a week. Marco has been with me since the beginning, since before Matteo was born. He was at my wedding. He sat with me in the hospital when Elena died. Which makes him the perfect person to betray you, Karen said desperately. Because you'd never suspect him. Leo's expression went cold. Or you're a paranoid outsider seeing conspiracies where there are none. Leo, you're dismissed, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Karen felt her breath catch. What? Pack your things. Security will escort you out. But Matteo is my son, and my responsibility, not yours. Leo moved toward the door, his back rigid. I'll have your final payment processed by end of business tomorrow. You're making a mistake, Karen said, her voice breaking. Leo paused at the doorway but didn't turn around. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Then he was gone, and Karen was left standing in her office, the spreadsheets full of evidence still glowing on her screen, feeling like the floor had just dropped out from under her. 2 security guards appeared within minutes. They weren't rough, but they weren't gentle either. One carried a cardboard box while the other watched her pack her personal items, the leather journal, her coffee mug, a framed photo of her mother. The walk to the elevator felt like a death march. As the doors closed, Karen caught a glimpse of Matteo down the hall, standing in Leo's office doorway. His face was stricken, confused. She tried to smile, to show him everything would be okay, but the doors closed before she could see if he smiled back. Karen sat in her apartment that night, staring at her phone. No calls, no messages, just silence and the crushing weight of having done the right thing and being punished for it. Again, she'd lost another job. This one paid more, but somehow hurt worse. Because it wasn't just a job. It was Matteo's laugh. It was the way Leo had almost smiled. It was the brief, shining possibility that she could matter to someone. Her phone buzzed at 1:01 p.m. Unknown number. She answered without thinking. Hello? Miss Grease. Leo's voice was tight, controlled, but underneath she heard something that sounded like fear. I need you to come back, now. What happened? I confronted Marco about the files, gave him a chance to explain. A pause. He ran. And he's not alone. Half my security detail went with him. Karen's blood ran cold. It was a test, Leo said quietly. I had to know if you'd tell me the truth when it could cost you everything. When I gave you every reason to back down, to doubt yourself. When I made you think I'd choose loyalty to him over evidence. You didn't believe me? I needed to know if you'd stand by your accusation even when I threw you out. If your integrity was real or just performance. His voice softened. You passed. Marco didn't. The moment I dismissed you, he started moving assets, making calls. He thought he'd won. And Matteo? Safe. With me. But Karen. Leo's voice carried an edge she'd never heard before. Something close to vulnerability. I need your help. Because you were right about everything. And now we're in a war I didn't see coming. Karen grabbed her jacket. I'm on my way. There's a car outside your building. Of course there was. As Karen headed for the door, she realized something. Leo Angelo hadn't just tested her. He'd shown her exactly how dangerous his world could be. And she was walking back into it anyway. The city looked different at midnight, sharper, more honest, stripped of its daytime pretenses. Karen watched it blur past the sedan's windows as they raced back to Angelo Holdings, her mind spinning through everything that had just unraveled. Marco had run, which meant she'd been right, which also meant she was now part of something far more dangerous than creative accounting. The building was almost empty when she arrived, just a skeleton crew of security guards whose eyes followed her with newfound wariness. They knew something had shifted, that the woman who'd been escorted out hours ago was now back with Leo's explicit authorization. She found him in his office, still in the same suit, but with his tie discarded and his sleeves rolled up. Papers covered his desk, financial records, personnel files, security logs. Mateo was curled up on the leather couch, asleep under a wool blanket. Leo looked up when she entered, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked almost relieved. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "You tested me. It wasn't an accusation, just a statement. I had to." Leo gestured to the chair across from his desk. "In my world, loyalty is either real or it's a performance waiting for the right price. I needed to know which one you were." Karen sat, her eyes moving to Mateo's sleeping form. "You used him. Let him think I was gone. He was never in danger. Not from me sending you away." Leo followed her gaze. "But yes, he was upset. Angry, actually. First time he's yelled at me in 2 years." Something tight in Karen's chest loosened slightly. "What did he say?" "That I was stupid. That you were the only person besides his mother who'd ever protected him without being told to." Leo's jaw worked. "That I was just like everyone else who throws away good people because I'm afraid." He said that. 9 years old, and he sees more clearly than I do. Leo turned back to the papers on his desk. "Marco emptied 3 accounts before we could freeze them. Contacted at least 6 of our security personnel. 4 of them went with him. 2 stayed loyal. Where is he now?" "Unknown. But he's not working alone. The attempt on Mateo, the timing of everything, he's been building something for months. Maybe longer." Karen leaned forward, her accounting mind already organizing the chaos. "Show me everything. Every transaction he authorized, every personnel file he had access to, every property under his supervision." They worked through the night. Coffee appeared at some point, brought by Christine, who said nothing but whose expression conveyed both apology and respect. Leo spread documents across the conference table while Karen built spreadsheets, tracking money flows like a hunter following blood trails through snow. "Here," she said around 3 a.m., highlighting a series of transfers. "Meridian Transport isn't just a shell company, it's the hub. Money comes in from your legitimate businesses, gets cleaned through Meridian, then flows to." She pulled up another file. "Viscari Imports, Marco's company. He registered it 8 months ago under his sister's name." Leo's expression darkened. "What's he importing? On paper? Restaurant supplies? Furniture? Nothing unusual." Karen opened another document. "But look at the shipping manifests versus the customs declarations. The weights don't match. Containers that should weigh 3,000 pounds are listed at 5,000. He's smuggling something. And using your logistics network to do it. Your trucks, your warehouses, your distribution routes." Karen pulled up a map, marking locations. "These 4 properties, all managed by Marco, all showing operational losses. They're not losing money. They're hiding it." Leo studied the map, his mind clearly working through implications. If Marco's running a parallel operation, he needs buyers, distribution, protection. Which means he's made deals with people I've specifically avoided, families I've kept at arm's length because they're too volatile, too violent. Leo's voice was grim. "He's not just stealing from me. He's building an alliance against me." The weight of that settled over the room like a shroud. "Why take that risk?" Karen asked. "Why not just steal quietly and disappear?" "Because he doesn't want to disappear. He wants what I have." Leo looked at Mateo, still sleeping. "My territory, my connections, my legitimacy, and the only thing standing in his way is your son." They both went quiet, the reality of Mateo's danger suddenly visceral. "That's why he tried to grab him today," Karen said. "Not to ransom him back to you. To eliminate him." Leo's hands clenched into fists. "He won't get close to my son again. He won't need to. Not if he convinces your other associates that you're weak, that you can't protect your own family." Karen met Leo's eyes. "He's not just building a business. He's staging a coup. Then we dismantle it before he can move." Leo stood, pacing to the window. "Every account, every contact, every piece of his operation. We trace it all, and we cut him off at the knees. That'll take time. And he knows we're looking now. So we work faster." Leo turned back to her. "Can you do this? Track the money? Find the proof? Give me everything I need to destroy him?" Karen thought about Mateo's small, sleeping form, about the way he'd hugged her that first day in Leo's apartment, about how a 9-year-old shouldn't have to worry about being kidnapped because of his father's business. "Yes," she said, "but I can't do it alone. I need access to everything. No more secrets, no more testing. Complete transparency." Leo studied her for a long moment. "That's a lot of trust to ask for." "You already tested me once. I passed." Karen didn't look away. "Question is, can I trust you?" Something shifted in Leo's expression. Not softness exactly, but recognition. Respect. "Fair enough." He extended his hand across the desk. "Partners?" Karen shook it, feeling the strength in his grip, the calluses that suggested he hadn't always worked behind a desk. "Partners," she agreed. "Now show me everything." As dawn broke over the city, painting the windows gold, Leo and Karen sat surrounded by evidence of betrayal. Mateo stirred on the couch, blinking awake, and his face lit up when he saw Karen. "You came back," he said sleepily. "I told you I would stay," Karen replied gently. Mateo looked at his father. "Did you apologize?" Leo's expression softened in a way Karen had never seen. "I'm about to." He crossed to his son, kneeling beside the couch so they were eye level. "I was wrong. I sent Karen away because I was afraid to trust the truth, but she was brave enough to tell it anyway. So she's staying? If she'll have us." Leo glanced at Karen. "Both of us." Mateo grinned genuinely, fully, and Karen felt something in her chest crack open completely. "We're going to fix this," Leo told his son. "All of it, I promise." And looking at them together, Karen realized she believed him. 3 days. That's how long Karen had to build an airtight case against Marco Viscari before he made his move. 3 days to trace money through a labyrinth of shell companies, to connect offshore accounts to real-world operations, to turn suspicion into evidence that would hold up in Leo's world where proof meant the difference between justice and war. She barely slept. Her office became a war room, whiteboards covered in flowcharts, printed bank statements spread across every surface, sticky notes marking connections between companies that existed only on paper. Christine brought food she barely touched. Security rotated shifts outside her door. And Leo was always there. Not hovering, not micromanaging, just present. Working parallel to her, making calls to contacts in legitimate businesses, shaking loose information about Marco's movements. Sometimes he'd stand at her window, silent, watching the city. Other times he'd review her findings, asking sharp questions that forced her to double-check her logic. On the second night, around 2 a.m., he brought 2 cups of coffee and sat across from her desk. "You should rest," he said. "So should you. I don't sleep much anymore. Haven't since Elena died." He took a sip, his eyes distant. "She used to tell me I worked too much, that I was building an empire but forgetting to live in it." Karen set down her pen. "What was she like?" "Strong, stubborn. She saw who I was, everything I was, and loved me anyway." His voice went soft. "She made Mateo laugh. Made me laugh. Made the darkness feel less heavy. He misses her. Every day. So do I." Leo looked at Karen then, really looked at her. "But he smiles around you, talks more. It's like..." A little bit of light came back. Karen's throat tightened. "I'm not trying to replace her. I know. That's why it matters." He paused. "You're here because you care about him. Not because of who I am or what I can give you. That's rare, Karen. In my world, that's everything." Before she could respond, her computer chimed. New email. She opened it. Financial records from one of Leo's trusted accountants. The offshore accounts Marco thought were hidden. "Got him," Karen breathed. The evidence was devastating. Marco had been siphoning money for 18 months, building Viscari imports into a shadow empire that mirrored Leo's legitimate operations. But the real revelation came when Karen cross-referenced shipping manifests with customs declarations. "He's not just smuggling goods," she told Leo the next morning, Mateo eating breakfast nearby. "He's moving contraband for the Cordova family." Leo went very still. "You're certain?" 3 separate shipments in the last 4 months. All routed through your warehouses, all signed off by Marco, all delivered to Cordova-owned properties. Karen pulled up photos from security cameras she'd accessed. "He's using your infrastructure to build an alliance with your biggest rival." "The Cordovas have wanted my territory for years," Leo said quietly. "Marco's giving them a way in, and making himself indispensable in the process. Once you're out of the way, he steps in as the Cordovas' partner, takes over my operations, my contacts, my legitimacy." Leo's jaw clenched. Brilliant, really. Patient. There's more. Karen pulled up the final document, the one that had kept her up all night. The attempt on Mateo wasn't random reconnaissance. It was scheduled. Marco sent an encrypted message to a Cordova enforcer 3 hours before school let out. GPS coordinates, timing, security rotations. Leo's face went cold in a way that made Karen's blood run ice. He tried to have my son kidnapped, to force your hand, to make you vulnerable. Karen met his eyes. He's been planning this for over a year, Leo. Since before you hired me, I was just an unexpected variable that accelerated his timeline. Mateo had stopped eating, his face pale. Uncle Marco did this? Leo crossed to his son immediately, kneeling beside him. Yes, but he's not your uncle. Not anymore. But he was at Mama's funeral. He brought me my birthday cake. Mateo's voice cracked. I know. Leo pulled his son close. Sometimes people we trust betray us. It's not your fault. It's not anyone's fault but his. Karen watched them, her heart breaking for this boy who'd already lost so much. What are you going to do? Mateo asked quietly. Leo looked at Karen, then back at his son. I'm going to protect our family. And I'm going to make sure he never hurts anyone again. The plan was simple in theory, complex in execution. Leo would call a board meeting a formal gathering of his top associates and business partners. An annual review of operations, completely routine. Marco wouldn't refuse the invitation without revealing his hand. Karen would present the evidence, clean, professional, irrefutable. And then Leo would let Marco make his choice. Walk away and disappear, or fight and lose everything. He'll choose to fight, Karen said as they prepared. Men like him always do. I know. Leo adjusted his cufflinks, his expression unreadable. Which is why I need you to stay with Mateo during the meeting. What? No, you need me there to... I need you safe. And I need my son safe. Leo's voice was firm. Marco will have people at that meeting. If things go wrong, if it turns violent, all the more reason I should be there. Karen. He stepped closer, and she saw something vulnerable in his eyes. You've given me the weapons I need. You've done your part. Let me do mine. And if something happens to you, then you take Mateo and you run. Christine has instructions, access to accounts, everything you'd need. He pulled out an envelope, pressed it into her hands. Promise me. Karen's hands shook. Leo, promise me. She looked at the envelope, then at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd somehow become more than just her employer. I promise, she whispered. Leo nodded, then did something unexpected. He pulled her into a brief, tight embrace. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. For Mateo. For showing me what loyalty looks like. Then he was gone, heading toward the conference room where Marco was already waiting. Karen stood frozen, the envelope heavy in her hands. Through the office window, she could see the skyline beautiful and indifferent, the city continuing like nothing was about to shatter. Mateo appeared at her side, slipping his small hand into hers. Papa will be okay, he said, but his voice trembled. Right? Karen squeezed his hand, wishing she could promise him that, wishing she believed it herself. Your father is the strongest person I know, she said instead. They sat together on the couch, waiting. The minutes stretched like hours. Karen's phone sat silent on the coffee table, and somewhere in the building above them, empires collided. The conference room on the 28th floor was designed to intimidate floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a table of polished black marble, leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Leo had chosen the location deliberately, high ground, symbolic and strategic. 8 men sat around that table, and every one of them had built fortunes in the gray spaces between legal and lethal. Marco sat directly across from Leo, composed and confident. He'd arrived early, shaken hands, made small talk about quarterly earnings, playing the loyal second-in-command so perfectly that if Leo hadn't seen the evidence, he might have doubted it himself. Gentlemen, Leo began, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd never needed to shout. Thank you for coming. This review is different from our usual meetings. Oh? Marco's smile was easy. Should we be concerned? That depends. Leo opened the folder in front of him. On whether you've been honest about your business activities. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. I've discovered some irregularities, Leo continued. Transactions that don't align with reported operations. Shipments that exceed documented inventory. Accounts that— Let me stop you there, Marco interrupted smoothly. If this is about the Meridian arrangements, I've been meaning to brief you on those. They're legitimate optimization strategies that funnel $2.3 million into offshore accounts you control. Leo's voice was ice. Accounts connected to Vescari Imports. Your company. Marco's smile didn't falter, but his eyes went hard. Everyone in this room has side ventures, Leo. It's how business works. You can't seriously be— I'm seriously questioning why those ventures involve my warehouses, my trucks, and my distribution networks. Leo slid a document across the table. I'm questioning why shipping manifests don't match customs declarations. Why containers carrying restaurant supplies weigh twice what they should. One of the other men, Salvatore, who ran Leo's logistics division, picked up the document. His face paled. I'm questioning, Leo continued, his voice dropping to something deadly, why my second-in-command has been moving contraband for the Cordova family. The silence that followed was absolute. Marco sat back, his composure finally cracking. Careful, Leo. Accusations like that require proof. I have proof. Leo pulled out his phone, pulled up an image, and slid it across the table. Security camera footage, Marco meeting with a known Cordova enforcer. Time-stamped, dated, irrefutable. Business meeting, Marco said, but his voice had lost its smoothness. Nothing illegal about. The meeting was 3 hours before someone tried to kidnap my son. Every person at that table went rigid. You sent them Matteo's school schedule, Leo said quietly. His security rotations. The GPS coordinates of the pickup zone. You orchestrated an attempt on a 9-year-old boy. That's insane. Marco stood, his chair scraping against marble. Why would I? Because Matteo is the only thing standing between you and control of this organization. Leo stood as well, and the two men faced each other across the table. Because the Cordovas promised you my territory in exchange for access to my infrastructure. Because you've been building this for over a year, waiting for the right moment to make your move. Marco's mask finally shattered completely, his face twisted with rage and something darker ambition that had curdled into hatred. You want to know why? Marco's voice was venom. Because I've been your second for 15 years. 15 years of watching you play the legitimate businessman while I did the dirty work. 15 years of being your attack dog while you got all the respect, all the power, all the glory. I gave you everything, Leo said. You gave me scraps. Marco slammed his hand on the table. And when Elena died, when you went soft, when you started talking about going legitimate and building something clean for Matteo, I knew you were done, that you'd rather play father than stay on top. So you decided to take over. I decided to partner with people who understand that power isn't about being loved, it's about being feared. Marco's smile was ugly now. The Cordovas aren't sentimental. They don't care about your son's feelings or your dead wife's memory. They care about results, and they're willing to give me what you never would equal standing, by using my son as leverage, by removing obstacles. Marco glanced at the other men around the table. All of you, you've felt it too. Leo going soft. Making decisions based on what's right instead of what's profitable. Some of you have already agreed to join me when the transition happens. 2 of the men shifted uncomfortably. Traitors, Leo thought, but not unexpected. Here's what's going to happen, Marco continued, his confidence returning. You're going to step down, quietly, retire from operations, spend time with your boy, and I'll take over, smooth and clean. No war, no bloodshed. Or, his voice hardened, we do this the hard way, and Matteo becomes collateral damage. The threat hung in the air like poison. Leo was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried the weight of absolute certainty. You're right about one thing. I did go soft. After Elena died, after watching my wife waste away while I built an empire, she begged me to leave. I realized what actually matters. And it's not territory or respect or being feared. He pulled out another folder thicker than the first. It's protecting the people I love, and being smart enough to see betrayal before it destroys me. He opened the folder. Inside were more documents, bank statements, recorded phone calls, photographs of Marco meeting with Cordova associates going back months. I've sent copies of everything to the FBI, the DEA, and several very interested journalists, Leo said calmly. Vescari Imports is finished. Your Cordova partners are exposed, and every account you control has been frozen as of 20 minutes ago. Marco's face drained of color. You're bluffing. Am I? Leo's smile was cold. Your offshore accounts in the Caymans empty. Your shell company's dissolved. Your contacts in my security team already arrested. You're not a partner, Marco. You're a liability. And the Cordovas don't tolerate liabilities. The realization hit Marco like a physical blow. Leo had outmaneuvered him completely. Not with violence, but with precision. With evidence and strategy and the kind of patient, calculated destruction that Marco should have seen coming. You have one choice, Leo said. Walk away now. Disappear. I won't hunt you if you go quietly. But if you ever threaten my son again, if you even think about coming back. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marco looked around the table at the men who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the evidence spread before him, at the empire he'd tried to steal crumbling before it ever existed. This isn't over, Marco hissed. Yes, Leo said quietly. It is. Marco reached inside his jacket, and 3 things happened at once. Security burst through the doors. The 2 men who'd shifted uncomfortably dove for cover. And Leo moved with the speed of someone who'd expected this exact moment, grabbing Marco's wrist and twisting hard. A gun clattered to the floor. Wrong choice, Leo said. Security had Marco on the ground in seconds, hands zip-tied, face pressed against expensive marble. He was screaming threats, promises of revenge, but his voice grew fainter as they dragged him out. Leo stood alone in the conference. Weeks later, the world looked different. Not objectively, the city still hummed with the same energy. The same deals whispered in expensive restaurants, the same power games played behind closed doors. But Karen's place in that world had fundamentally shifted. She stood in front of Bellagio Prime, or what used to be Bellagio Prime. The restaurant had been closed for renovations, its old name stripped away, replaced by something new, something meaningful. Matteo's Place. The sign gleamed in the afternoon sun, elegant script in warm gold lettering. Through the windows, she could see the transformed interior, still sophisticated, but warmer now. Less marble coldness, more comfortable elegance. The kind of place where families could laugh without feeling out of place. Do you like it? Leo's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him standing with Matteo, both of them dressed casually for once. No suits, no armor, just a father and son on a sunny afternoon. It's perfect, Karen said honestly. It was Matteo's idea, Leo said, his hand resting on his son's shoulder. He said we should take the place where everything changed and make it into something better. Somewhere people don't get fired for being nice. Matteo added with a grin. Karen laughed, the sound feeling natural now. Easy. 3 weeks ago she'd been terrified. Now she was. What? Happy? It seemed too simple a word for the complicated tangle of emotions she felt around these two. Come on, Leo said, unlocking the front door. I want to show you something. Inside, the restaurant smelled of fresh paint and possibility. The tables were already set, the kitchen gleaming and new. But Leo led her past all of that, to a small office in the back. Her name was on the door. Karen Grease, general manager. You're putting me in charge? She asked, stunned. You rebuilt my legitimate businesses from the ground up, Leo said. Cleaned up the mess Marco left, restructured the accounting, made everything transparent. You did in 3 weeks what I should have done years ago. He paused. This restaurant is yours to run however you see fit. Clean books, fair wages, no shadows. I don't know what to say. Say you'll take the job, Matteo piped up. Please, because Papa is terrible at picking out menu designs and I need an adult ally. Say? Hey, Leo protested, but he was smiling, genuinely smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. Karen looked at this office, this opportunity, this strange little family that had formed in the wreckage of betrayal and danger. She thought about the woman she'd been 3 weeks ago, broke, desperate, invisible, and the woman she was now valued, trusted, seen. Yes, she said. I'll take the job. Matteo whooped and threw his arms around her waist. Leo's expression softened in that way that still made her heart skip. There's one more thing, Leo said. He pulled out an envelope, official-looking, sealed. Legal documents. Making you Matteo's legal guardian in case anything happens to me. Karen's breath caught. Leo, that's necessary and right. His voice was firm. You've proven you'll protect him with everything you have, even from me, when you thought I was making the wrong choice. That's exactly who I need looking after my son if I can't. Nothing's going to happen to you, Karen said, but her voice trembled. Probably not. I've gone legitimate, remember? Very boring now. His smile was wry. But I've learned the hard way that the people we love need protection. Legal protection, not just emotional. Mateo looked between them, his expression serious beyond his years. Does this mean Karen's family now? Leo met Karen's eyes, and something passed between them in understanding, a connection that had been building since that first day at the restaurant when she defended a scared boy she didn't know. Yes, Leo said quietly. She's family now. The grand opening of Mateo's place was a week later. The city's elite showed up, Leo's business associates, politicians, society figures who wanted to be seen at the newest Angelo venture. But mixed among them were different faces. Karen's old co-workers from her waitressing days, invited as honored guests, community members from the neighborhood, families with children who laughed and didn't worry about being thrown out. Karen worked the room in her new role, greeting guests, ensuring everything ran smoothly. She'd hired Maria as head server, her old trainer who'd mouthed, "I'm sorry," the day she was fired. David was the bar manager now. Even Christine had transferred over from Angelo Holdings, serving as Karen's assistant with genuine warmth, instead of corporate coolness. Around 8 p.m., as the dinner rush settled into comfortable conversation, Leo found Karen in the kitchen. "You did it," he said. "Turn this place into something real." "We did it," Karen corrected. "All of us." Through the kitchen window, they could see Mateo sitting at a corner table with Christine, working on homework but smiling between equations. He looked up, caught Karen's eye, and waved. She waved back, her chest tight with emotion. "You know what Elena told me once?" Leo said quietly. "She said the measure of a good life wasn't how much power you accumulated, but how many people you helped become better versions of themselves." He looked at Karen. "You've done that. For Mateo, for me, for everyone who works here. I just tried to do the right thing. Most people don't. That's what makes it extraordinary." Leo paused, and something vulnerable crossed his face. "I'm not good at this, at saying what I feel, but you need to know that you didn't just save my business, or protect my son. You reminded me what it means to be human, to trust, to build something that matters." Karen felt tears prick her eyes. "You gave me a chance when no one else would. You saw value in me when I couldn't see it in myself. Because it was there. Always was." Leo smiled, that rare, genuine smile that still surprised her. "Come on. Mateo wants to make a toast, and he's been practicing all day." They walked back into the dining room together. Mateo stood on a chair, grinning, holding a glass of sparkling cider like he'd seen adults do with champagne. "Can I have everyone's attention?" His voice carried across the restaurant, stronger than it had been 3 weeks ago. More confident. The room quieted, all eyes turning to this small boy who'd survived so much. "My papa says this restaurant is named after me, which is cool," Mateo said. "But really, it should be named after Karen, because she's the one who taught us that being strong means protecting people, that being rich means nothing if you're not kind, and that family isn't just blood, it's who shows up when things are scary." He raised his glass. "To Karen, for showing up, and for staying." "To Karen," the room echoed. Karen felt Leo's hand briefly touch the small of her back, a gesture of support, of connection, of something that might, given time, become even more. She raised her own glass, looking around at the faces, old friends, new colleagues, a boy who'd stolen her heart, and a man who'd become far more complicated than she ever expected. "To second chances," she said, "and to families we choose." The restaurant erupted in applause and laughter. Outside, the sun set over the city, painting the windows gold. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth and light and people who mattered, Karen Grease finally understood what it meant to be home. Not a place, not a job, not even a building with her name on the door. Home was standing beside people who valued you, who saw your courage and reflected it back, who proved that sometimes one moment of defending what's right could rewrite your entire destiny. She'd lost everything defending a scared child, and in return, she'd gained a family, a purpose, and proof that kindness, real, costly, inconvenient kindness, could still change the world. Thanks for sticking with this story till the end. If you enjoyed it, you're going to love the next one. It's packed with unexpected turns and heartfelt moments. Click the image on your screen to keep the journey going, and make sure to hit subscribe for more amazing stories. Drop a comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I can't wait to see what you think.